This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio, and you're here with me, Poppy Gibson, and very excited because hopefully, fingers crossed, if all goes well, we will be speaking to a teacher overseas, over in Texas, USA.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and you are listening live. Tune in live at ttradio.org, or to join in the conversation, download the Podbean app and search Teachers Talk Radio. Follow the hashtag TTRadio. Tune in, talk it out with Teachers Talk Radio.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Introducing Eton X from Eton College, a diverse range of quality online courses enabling young people to aspire and excel. Designed for self-study, these web-based courses empower your students with essential leadership, communication, and academic skills for success at school and beyond. Our Study Skills course sharpens their learning abilities, while the AI Fundamentals course equips them with vital digital know-how in a fast-changing world. Other popular courses include verbal communication, critical thinking, writing skills, resilience, creative problem solving, and many more. Offer the Eton X curriculum in your school for free. Visit etonx.com to find out more.
This is Teachers Talk Radio, and this is Teachers Talk Radio News.
Ofsted finds itself in the news again as inspections paused for a 2-week period to allow inspectors to undertake mental health awareness training begin again on the 22nd of January. ITV News shared the results of a survey of almost 2,000 school leaders, which showed that 97% support the removal of single-word judgments. The survey, carried out by NAHT Union, followed the outcome of the inquest into the death of Ruth Perry. The union has urged Ofsted to implement a number of changes, including a mechanism for school leaders to halt an inspection where an inspector's conduct falls below standards, extending the notice period schools receive for inspection, and asking them to revert to a process, however temporarily, of ungraded inspections similar to those conducted during the pandemic. Meanwhile, the BBC reports that Ofsted has apologised fully for the first time for the role it played in Ruth Perry's death. The apology came at the same time as Ofsted responded to the coroner's Prevention of Future Deaths notice. In the PFD response, new Ofsted chief Sir Martin Oliver said, "Such tragedies should never happen again," and that he apologised sincerely for the part inspection played in her death. Since the death of Mrs Perry, schools judged as inadequate on safeguarding alone are now re-inspected within 3 months. Ofsted also changed its confidentiality rules to allow heads to speak to colleagues, family, friends and health professionals about outcomes of inspections before the report is actually published. The Department for Education has committed to working with Ofsted to review things during a consultation in the spring, which it is calling the Big Listen. Education unions praised Ofsted's positive steps, but said they were only the beginning. The weather has been front and centre of the news this week, with schools across parts of Wales and Scotland being forced to close due to snow. Icy conditions and weather warnings made for tricky travel and forced school closures in areas badly affected. For those concerned that the post-pandemic impact of remote learning would mean the end of snow days, pictures on social media and local news proved that this was not always the case. But anyone worried that the icy blasts will last can be assured that the weather is set to return to normal over the next few days. Authors, including Sir Michael Morpurgo and Mallory Blackman, have written an open letter urging the government to invest in early years reading. According to a Book Trust survey, only half of children between 1 and 2 from low-income families are read to daily, with some families struggling to access books and being in need of support. The letter from authors is addressed to both Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, and says it is not right that children from poorer backgrounds are deprived of a life rich in reading. Sir Michael Morpurgo is president of the charity Book Trust and helped launch their new campaign, Get Reading, to support disadvantaged children in family reading. He spoke on BBC's Radio 4's Today programme, saying that the younger that children are introduced to the power of stories, the better chance there is of putting them on an extraordinary pathway of knowledge, understanding and empathy. He also said that books need to be free at the point of delivery, like the health service. A DFE spokesperson said, "We are committed to raising literacy for children," but Sir Michael said that these efforts are clearly not enough. Finally, The Guardian features an article which looks at research in America that appears to show that children learn better on paper than on screens. The research follows headlines across the pond which focused on the nationwide collapse in reading scores among American youths, citing a 4-point drop in the comprehension skills of 13-year-olds, falling below skill levels of 1971 for the worst performing students. Politicians appear to be assigning blame to the pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns, with remote learning being labelled as bad for students by the Biden administration. Others blame teachers who they say lobbied for lockdowns. However, the article itself focuses on a new study by neuroscientists at Columbia University's Teachers College, which appears to show there is a clear advantage to reading a text on paper rather than on a screen, because it leads to what they describe as deeper reading. A sample of 59 children aged 10 to 12 were asked to complete a series of tasks, which led researchers to conclude that we should not yet throw away printed books and shouldn't rely on the digital revolution just yet. Further details can be read on the Guardian website. This has been your Teachers Talk Radio News with Jo Fox.
Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. You're here with me, Poppy Gibson. Hopefully you've had a good week. Hopefully the sun is shining. I'm absolutely amazed that here we have got the sun out in the UK. I feel like a miracle. Even on the school run this morning, my son was saying, it's summer here now. I had to let him know, no, not for a while. But without further ado, I mean, I'm almost shell-shocked. Good morning, Jared.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Oh my goodness, you've just made my week. I can hear you.
Wonderful. So glad.
Like, I love how, even though you're in a totally different part of the world, you have joined effortlessly. So a huge thank you from our listeners and from me today.
It's amazing the time we live in, you know, that we can talk.
This is a time
UK
to be alive.
Texas. It really is. It really is. It really is. I think so.
It really is. And I think we have to confess to our listeners. And morning, Dave. I can see is listening in. Morning, Alex is listening. Jared, what time is it where you are, please?
5:01 a.m.
Wow. I mean, I think this speaks volumes. You're a very dedicated, passionate educator already.
That's
Before
true.
I even ask you any questions.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for being up so early. And so, Jared, I'm really excited today because I know the theme of our show is we would love to hear from you, your experience of when you're teaching over here in the UK in the past, and now what it's like for you in your current role. So I hope it's okay. I've just got a list of loads of questions to ask you today.
Sure.
Wonderful. Before I do that, and I know our listeners are dying to hear like all about you, and maybe the first question I'll ask you in a minute is about how you got into education. And I would love you to take as long as you like to just really talk us through the steps from whenever, you know, secondary school or whenever you started to think what you want to do as a career. So start thinking on that. But first, I have a confession to make.
Sure. Okay.
And I hope you won't hang up when I tell you. But the also secret reason I was so excited to read that you live in Texas, is that correct for a start?
Correct. Yeah, Houston.
Okay.
I live in Houston.
Okay, wonderful.
Hmm.
Good. Okay, so this leads on to my confession.
Sure.
One of my absolute favorite secret TV shows is this animation from like the 90s, although there's a new series coming soon called King of the Hill. Do you know
Yes.
it, Jared?
Yes. Oh, love King of the
Are you
Hill.
a fan? Yeah, you're a fan?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm obsessed. Younger, when DVDs were a thing, I had every box set of King of the Hill cartoon, and on like, you know, those evenings when your brain is melting, I would just watch King of the Hill. Like, I will binge watch, and I'm so excited you're actually there. I mean, have you seen Hank or Bobby like walking around?
All the time. All the time. Those characters come from someplace real. And yeah.
That's so cool. I'm glad you're a fan.
Oh, for
Okay,
sure.
so without further ado, then I'm literally going to ask a question and mute myself, and I just want you to go. Tell us, question one: how did you get into education? Off you go.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you said you want me to take as long as I need, and I will. All right. I'll give you the details of that. So, coming out of high school, which high school for us is ages 14 to 18. So think year 10, 11, 12, and 13 over there. So when I was coming out of high school, I wanted badly to go into a career as a stage actor, a film actor, one of those. And I went in from high school. I went to a university program where I was pursuing a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in acting. After a couple of years, I changed my major to theater studies and concentrated in directing. That doesn't sound like a long leap or a big different change to a non-theater person, but it's quite a different path. Um, so I was going the directing route, and then I graduated, and I was supposed to go into a job straight out of my university experience with a brand new theater in Middletown, Ohio. And a few months into that, some financial things weren't right, and the job ended up falling through. That ended up being actually a wonderful twist of fate, quite a moment that felt at the time like a crisis, and it was a crisis. I mean, job falls through. I had to move home with my parents, which I didn't want to do, but ended up loving that experience too, and getting closer to them during that time. But moved home with mom and dad, and took a job as I took a temp position with a with a bank in my hometown of Columbus, Ohio, and I was working on data entry with having to do with home mortgages, and it felt to me it felt soul sucking. I mean, there are people that do that every day and are wonderful at it, and we need every one of those people doing those jobs. Um, but it was not for me, and it wouldn't be fair to those with mortgages if I was the one doing their data entry because I I didn't care about it. It wasn't me. It wasn't my passion. Um, so I quit after 4 days. I was and I recall I was more afraid of what would happen to me if I didn't quit that job. Sure, I had fear about, okay, you're going to quit this. What's going to happen to your income, all that. But I was more
Mm.
afraid of what would happen if I didn't quit. So I made up some excuse, left early one day, and went home. And my mother said, she goes, your old high school needs substitute teachers. And I said, okay, well, that sounds like a temporary thing that I can do while I'm looking for theater gigs in town and pursuing graduate degrees in theater. I can be a substitute teacher for a little while. So called up the school. They said, yeah, we need subs. So started substitute teaching there, and within a couple of weeks of that, one of their long established history teachers had a heart attack, and
Oh my goodness.
yeah, and he ended up making it, and he was fine, but they needed somebody to cover his classes for 2 weeks. So I go in, and for 2 weeks, I'm the one teaching history to them. It was really a principles of democracy class, technically, but doing that work, getting to know the kids over the course of a couple weeks, and being their teacher for a couple of weeks really kind of made me go on a deep thought journey. And I finally realized, I went, you know what? I can do this. I could do a job like this,
Wow.
and I could potentially do theater after school with them. Wouldn't that be cool? So I was about to pursue my certification in social studies history, and then that ended up not happening, because I ended up getting a series of other jobs that were theater related. Um, so eventually, what happened was I went to uh, eventually, started getting more theater gigs, started doing more theater related jobs in Columbus, my hometown, where I was more from, and then I ended up going to graduate school at Emerson College in Boston, and a, a year into that, uh, I took a trip to Europe for the first time, and I went and visited London for 4 days. During that time, I went and visited the London Academy of. I went over to Lambda and visited them. I was looking at a directing program to do after I finished my graduate degree. My graduate degree is in theater education, and the program, the directing program wasn't going to work for me. I figured that out pretty quick, but I did over the course of a few days in London. I thought, you know what, I could live here. I could live here.
Wow.
And honestly, though, I should say this too, that to live in the UK had been not a secret ambition, but it had been something I'd been interested in the idea of since I was like 7 or 8 years old. I was very, very into the UK and what was going on over there. I was doing school projects on monarchs and those things. But so then here I was, in my 20s in graduate school, and and I'm visiting the UK, thinking, you know what, this really could work. So
Wow.
finished the trip to Europe, got back to Boston. I contacted the British consulate in Boston, and I said, how does somebody who's an American get a teaching job in the UK? And this was 2004, and I think it was easier for Americans at the time. I don't think it's quite as easy with the visa process now. But so they sent me back the Times Educational Supplement, and I looked on there and I noticed all these drama teaching jobs for January of 2005. And I thought, well, that's right about when I'm going to be doing my student teaching for my certification here. So I thought, well, why not? I'll just send my resume, and I'm getting all these responses back. And suddenly I thought, ooh, okay, this may be possible. So I contact the
Wow.
head of my graduate program. He says you can do your student teaching there. That's fine. Ended up taking a position in Brentwood, Essex, at Shenfield High School.
No way. That's about
Way.
15 minutes from me. That's about 15 minutes.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, you're at you teach in Chelmsford, right?
Do you
Is
know
that
Chelmsford?
I lived in Chelmsford when I taught at Shenfield.
No way.
That's how
What a small world.
that's how we know the same person that we know.
Oh, let's shout her out. Thank you, Chrissy. I know she's going to listen
Chrissy,
back. Chrissy's going to listen back to this. She told me she
Dr.
couldn't listen
Chrissy.
live.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
love you, Chrissy.
Love you. Love you,
We
Chrissy.
love
Love
her
you,
so much.
young
Anyway,
lady.
sorry to interrupt. I
Yeah,
interrupted, but okay, you're in
no, it's okay. It's
Brentwood.
okay. Yeah, so I took a job at Shenfield High School in Brentwood, and yeah, got over there in January of '05, and and then there I was doing my first job and my student teaching at the same time, um, and so kind of got into it that way. What wasn't something I planned to do in my undergraduate, but it kind of found me, or I found it. I'm not sure who found who with education and me, but we ended up getting together. So that's been good.
Wow, what a story. And so I loved hearing that journey. Firstly, thank you for sharing that. In
Sure.
your opinion, now looking back, and I particularly found that interesting, that story of when you were at the bank and you just
Yeah.
felt like it was destroying you. And I love that. Did you say you were there for 4 days?
I was there 4 days,
I
and
love it. But
yeah,
I love that you
4
just took a
days.
risk and you were like, this isn't me. So I guess
Yeah.
my next question, do you therefore think teaching is a vocation? Was it like a calling? Like, are we born teachers? What's your opinion?
Ooh, good question. I think some of us are. I think some of us are born to do it. I think some of us um, learn it and get better at it as we go. I've seen a lot of that. I've seen a lot of the difference of that in Texas, especially. We've and I think it's true in the UK too. I mean, there's been many a path created by legally as far as roads to qualification, roads to certification, and that's been done out of necessity because we need people to
Mhm.
do the jobs. And I think within that uh, populace of people that are doing the job, I think there are those that are born to do it. I've seen those people work, and it's wonderful to watch. But I've also seen wonderful people work who struggled, and it wasn't them, and that they didn't feel like it was them, and then they came back to it and stayed with it. So I think it's a long answer to your question, but I think the short answer to your question is yes, both.
Interesting. And for you personally?
Ooh, I feel like I feel like I have had a chance to experience. This may not. I hope this answers your question. It may not be a totally direct answer. Um, it's there's the Japanese idea of, I believe the word, and I'm so sorry to our listeners that do speak Japanese, or to your listeners that do speak Japanese. I may get this word wrong. I believe the word is ikigai, and it's the concept of. I'm going to do my best to describe this. The concept of doing what you love, doing what you're good at, and what you love, and what you're passionate about all at once. There's a beautiful Venn diagram describing it, where so many things meet together. And I think in so many jobs I've had in the classroom, and then in
Mhm.
my current position, I've gotten to have moments of and stretches of time where I was living in that ikigai, where I was doing something I was good at and liked, and gave me fuel and fire. And I think once you've tasted that and lived that, you you want it again.
Mhm.
And so I kind of feel like since I've experienced it, I'm always striving to make my working life that. May not
Wow.
be the answer you're after, but
No, I love it.
yeah.
I love it. I'm going to look at that Japanese word, which I also have no idea. I'll have to listen back to the show. The great thing about Teachers Talk Radio, we can listen back. But I love that, and I can hear the passion in what you're saying, which is also why we were so happy to have you on, because
Thank you.
we love
Thank you.
passionate educators. So my next question, I was going to ask you to talk a bit more about when you taught and lived in the UK, but I know you've
Sure.
spoken a bit about that. I wonder, was there any particular highlight that stood out, or even more generally than the classroom, anything you loved about our culture over here, or a good cup of tea? Is that something you've taken back to Texas with you?
I do have PG tips at my house. Yeah,
Good choice.
I do have PG tips at my house. I had a moment with my aunt was visiting. I don't know if you're going to use this in the show or not.
We don't cut anything, so it's
Oh,
going.
wow. So you will use this. All right. Well, then I'll make sure my aunt hears this. So my aunt was visiting me once, and it was in Texas. She was visiting me, and I had PG tips in the house, and she takes a PG tips bag and she, puts the hot water on it, and then she leaves it. She steeps it for a while, which is we typically will do tea that way. We'll steep it, we'll leave it there. But PG tips, you don't need to do that. You just, water goes in, it's basically done. And she like left it there for like 10 minutes or something. And then she drank the tea, and then she said to me the next day, she's like, "This tea turned my teeth brown. Why did it do that?" And I went, "What? It doesn't do that. I said, "How'd you make it? What'd you do?" And she described what she did. And I went, "Oh, yeah, yeah. You don't need to do that with this. You just drop it in. It's done. Yeah, you don't do it the way we do it." So,
that was a teachable moment. So I love that you still educated. There's still the education story.
Educated my physician aunt. That's right.
I love this. And also, of course, many other tea brands are available.
Oh yeah.
So let's jump on, because the main thing I'm really interested to talk to you about. My next question: can you tell us more about theatre education in Texas?
Sure. It is both very large and very small. And what I mean by that is we have more kids taking theater as a class in school, in high school, in Texas than any other state in the country. I don't know how much data we have on middle schools with kids taking theater in middle school in Texas, but I'm going to guess that we probably have the most in the country doing that as well. The reason for that is we have an awesome um, theatrical educational theater contest in the spring for high schools. It's run by the University Interscholastic League out of Austin. They also govern sports. They also govern pretty much every competitive every contest that might happen in public schools in Texas. And they also govern a one-act play contest, 18 to 40-minute shows. And they have something like 1,400 schools across the state participating in it every year. And that's what makes it the largest educational theater contest in the world.
Wow.
Because it's got the University Interscholastic League, or UIL, behind it, it gives it a cachet that has saved theater programs. Participation in it and the recognition it can bring for schools. I mean, if a school goes all the way and wins the state contest, I mean, that's certainly something they can brag about. And it's been something that those in leadership who are not theater people can look at and recognize. Yeah, the UIL When I Play, I know what that is. I may not know why it is you need to hang and focus lights differently for every show, but I know what UIL When I Play is, and I want our teachers doing it. So because of that, I mean, that's why we have so many kids taking theater in high school in Texas, and we have so many wonderful people teaching it. And if somebody goes to one of our teacher conferences, which there's numerous ones in Texas we have, where theater teachers from around the state see each other annually. If you go to one of our conferences for teachers, or one of our conferences for kids in Texas, it looks overwhelmingly huge. But what I've figured out is the community of theater educators that have been around a while is actually very small. It's everybody pretty much knows everybody, or they know someone in common, which has been great. I mean, that's great for sharing resources. That's great for, I mean, if I'm ever dealing with anything as an administrator, and I'm not sure how to deal with something, or if it's supporting a teacher, or a situation I've never dealt with before, there's absolutely someone in Texas I can call.
I love that.
Yeah, and I can say, look, we're dealing with this. What do you think? And I've received phone calls like that too. People have asked, hey, we're starting something with theater that's going to be for elementary students. You and your district is doing that better than most. What are you doing? Can you tell us about that? That kind of thing. Actually, tomorrow, I was hoping I would get to talk about this. I may as well talk about it right now.
Tell us.
Tomorrow, actually, I've got what I'm going to be doing all day is I'll be up early again tomorrow, because we've got a one-act festival for elementary students, and that's the and one of our it's being hosted at one of our middle schools, and we'll
Hmm.
have students between the ages of 3 and 11.
Wow, three.
One of our schools is one of our elementary schools is connected to an early learning center, and so they asked me. They said, "Hey, can we have kids from the early learning center in our chorus of our show that we're going to do for the One Act Fest?" I'm like, "Yeah, you can. That's fine." So
Wow.
so we're going to have some 3-year-olds there, and then in one of our shows, and then the rest will be uh, between 5 and 11. Um, yeah, I mean, so
Wow, good
that's tomorrow.
luck.
Thank
Good luck.
you.
That sounds
Appreciate that.
amazing.
Yes,
Do all
happy
like
tomorrow.
the parents and carers can come and watch? It's that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
event.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I
free
love
free attend,
that.
and we make it free to attend for a few reasons. I mean, we want to maximize the audience and the exposure to it,
Mhm,
but we also wanted to make it easier on the schools to get royalties and those kind of things. If admission's free, royalties are cheaper, that kind of thing. But
mhm, mhm,
yeah, that's tomorrow. Theater in elementary school is one of those things in Texas that's still kind of getting going,
mhm,
and we've got 15 15 or 16 campuses in my district that have it, and that's when I go to these big conferences I talked about. That's the thing that other theater administrators from districts especially want to talk to me about. Like,
mhm,
tell me about this One Act Fest with elementary you're doing. Tell me about this Shakespeare Fest with elementary that your district does. Can we, how are you doing that? And so
mhm, mhm.
that's been fun. So yeah,
Wow, it sounds like such a supportive community, the
it
fact that
really
everyone
is.
knows everyone.
Hmm.
I love that. And so,
Really
firstly,
is.
yes, huge good luck tomorrow. We'll all be
Thank
thinking of
you.
you. If
Appreciate
you're
it.
listening back, this event may have happened on the 27th of Jan. So, we'll look forward to some updates on your socials, please, Jared,
For
after
sure.
this.
For sure.
Um, Before my next question, then, I want to pick up on some of the things you're saying there, because this
Hmm.
sounds like, as you say, you're seeing the uptake in theatre studies growing.
Hmm.
I would say in the UK, we're seeing the focus on humanities shrinking.
Hmm.
Anything around the arts, drama, anything like that seems the funding is being pumped instead to English and maths provision.
Hmm.
Do you think that's also the case? Do you think also, I mean, how did you feel teachers were regarded when you were here in the UK? Because in my opinion, I think we're not regarded very highly compared to,
Yeah.
is there more respect for teachers in your opinion in Texas? Like, did you notice any differences or?
As far as respect for teachers, I think there is respect for teachers for people that know what teachers go through. There is, and I think exists everywhere in the world. I think there are those that don't know the profession and look at it and assume, oh, you just work 8 a.m. to 3 and then you leave and then that's your job done and everything. Oh, and you get the summers off, and that must be nice and everything. And what of course, we know what those people don't see is the real work that goes into it, the going in early, the difficult meetings with parents, etc. Um, I think in terms of pay and in terms of benefits and those things for teachers and all that, in the U.S. it kind of depends on where you are. I think there are some states that have been a little bit better about paying their teachers and taking better care of them. Um, and but I think that's kind of true around the world too. As far as the emphasis on English and maths, as you said in the UK, that's always been that sounds like the story of my life. That sounds like I've been dealing with that as an educator. Gosh, even when I was a sub, I remember subbing for a class, and for whatever reason, we were in the auditorium, and I remember somebody coming in, and I said, "Oh, is it too loud in here?" And they said, "No, you're fine. You're not near any academic portion of the building." And I
Oh,
wanted to. I know. And I'm like,
wow.
"What?" And the thing is, that's I still hear that from people. And I still hear that from people I love and trust
Wow.
that are administrators I admire. And there's one in particular. I won't say her name. But there's one in particular that I worked for, that I remember in her office saying, this was a principal of a school, talking about the academic subjects, blah, blah, blah. And then she looked at me, she's like, I can see your face. I know what you're thinking. I know I said it, you know.
Wow.
And I remember that being a discussion, like, these are academic subjects. There is that, it's not just going in there and playing a bunch of games. There's real life stuff.
Yeah.
Something that I've had some inroads with as far as advocacy for theater is, I once did a training for assistant principals in our district. This was at an in-district conference on literacy, and I showed our district's assistant principals in this training all the vocabulary words that are learned by students from kindergarten through second grade if they're in theater classes, and this was assuming that the theater teachers that they had followed the curriculum that the district had to the letter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, look, there's 60 some vocabulary words they learn, and they learn them not just by reading them and writing them and learning the definitions. They learn them kinesthetically.
Mm-hmm.
They learn what a blackout is because they're on stage and the lights go out, and that's a blackout. They learn, what XYZ is over here because they live it. And I remember that getting their attention. I remember as they, to borrow the phrase from the UK, the penny dropping, when I gave that session numerous times, and that was the moment for a lot of them. They went, oh wow, they're learning a lot of words.
The light bulb moment. But isn't that crazy? Yeah. You really had to point that out.
Mm-hmm.
Advocacy
is part of the job. Advocacy is, I think advocacy is an expected part of the job. If I'm ever in a position of being in on a hire for a job, that for a teaching position, that's something I'm looking for in the teacher too, is how are they going to advocate? Are they going to make friends with somebody and sort of casually slip the advocacy in? What kind of advocate are they? Because they have to be.
Mm-hmm. That's so, I love that you're out there spreading the word, and here on Teachers Talk Radio spreading the word. But another thing I wanted to pick your brains about, so I can hear that passion, obviously, and looking at your career history for theatre, but isn't it interesting when we ask people, so I do a lot of work around well-being, and when I'll say to my students, even, they're training teachers, I'll say, what do you do to nurture your well-being, if you're feeling stressed? And so many of them will say things like, listen to music, watch a film, go to the cinema. So we can see that these are the things. No one has yet said, I do a maths test, right?
Right.
So, I mean, maybe they do, they just don't want to admit it. But what I gauge generally from this anecdote is that the things that seem to nurture our soul are these arts and humanities, yet we give them so little kind of gravitas in our school. And if we look back, I don't know, hundreds of years, how we imagine it might have been, medieval times, there was a jester telling jokes, there was someone with like a flute dancing around, and this was what brought joy pre-technology. Yes. And still brings joy. But I mean, so one thing I want to say to you, Jared, actually, my oldest son is in year 8, so he's coming up 13. And we had his parents' evening last night, and all his teachers, like, he's amazing, and his teachers all love him. And what was really interesting, he's about to pick his GCSEs next year, which he'll take at 16, and all his like creative subject teachers were like, I hope he picks art, I hope he picks CDT, design technology, and like, obviously he's got a passion for that. And I can remember when I was picking my options, thinking, I must pick these stereotypically academic subjects to get on in life. But for him, I was like, you're just going to have to pick what you want to do. Like, we shouldn't put pressure on children to think they have to pick traditionally academic subjects to be successful, right? It should be what the heart wants, but that's not what society sees, right?
Right. I mean, there's many a path to a goal. You're going to end up where you're supposed to be. We have a very funny way of doing that in our lives. And I think there's a perception of when we're pushing, um, when we're pushing, subjects that are English, math, science, social studies, whatever that is, that's, if that's your passion, that's fine. But if we're pushing extra ones in there, I do wonder what our end goal is. We have available in Texas right now. It's possible for students as young as seventh grade's 12 and 13, as young as 12, to take Algebra 1 when they're in seventh grade. Which there's a lot of abstract concept with algebra 1 in and for a seventh grader to do
Wow.
that is a lot. And then but then the way the path works is they'll go algebra 1, then they'll take geometry as an eighth grader, so 13, 14, and then they take algebra 2 again. Well, there was so much they were struggling with when they were 12 and learning it, that they're rusty now.
Wow.
And that's always something I kind of wondered about, like, and we also do have on level math too. On level's fine. If that's where you are, fine. You're not behind anyone. It was sort of like, it was one of those questions that came up during COVID of so many people said, "Oh, I don't want my kid to get behind." It's like, behind who?
Yeah. Behind with what?
Everyone's in the same place. Just we're all going to be a little bit, look, this pandemic's affecting us all. So yeah, I always do wonder about that. Like, now that's to say, if your kid is, I mean, and I myself have a daughter that's almost 2, and she's wonderfully brilliant. When she's a seventh grader, if she can handle algebra 1 and desperately wants to do it, and we can understand what we want high school to look like as a result, and we can see what calculus we want her in, if that's her path, if that's her drive, fine. But I'm not pushing her to go into algebra 1 because that's what everybody else is doing. I'm not doing that. It's if she's on level, she's on level. And I'm ready to be the parent that complains if they ever take her out of an art or music class when she's in elementary school. I'm like already gearing up for it. Like, don't do that again. Don't you take her out of that again. Well, and because
she's lucky to have you.
well, I'll put this in just real quick too. With the English and the math, theater in particular, and I think this is true of all the arts, but theater in particular there's so much practical application of both in that. And that's where I think the advocacy piece comes in, because I think those in charge don't quite get that. They need to be shown it. They need to be shown that if you're building a set, you have to measure twice before you cut. You're using angles. Even in blocking a play, in staging a play, you're using angles in geometry all the time. And I think we need to, I think as advocates, we need to get better about making sure that our non-arts people know that they're actually helping with your English and your maths.
Definitely. And on top of that, so like you say, all the behind the scenes stuff, so many skills there. But even, if we look at the actors that are taking part in the theatre, like so my amazing son that I mentioned, he did a poem at the Carol concert. He is in drama club, and he performed like at the Christmas variety show. And I was saying to him afterwards, I was like, I love my university students, but they're 18 plus, and I know some of them would rather crawl into a hole than have to stand in front of a room of people. So this is such a valid and important space to give people confidence, and when we see anxiety at all-time highs, to actually battle that and get these people. Often my students, Jared, like, on a Monday in my lecture, I'll say, who wants to come up, that maybe they've made a poster. I'll say, who wants to come up and share their poster under the dot cam? No one.
No.
Or if I'm lucky, one. And I'll say, you want to be teachers, most of you. How are you going to stand in front of a classroom of 30 small people who are relying on you, if you can't stand
Yeah,
in front of 25 peers. And I think that just the theatre in general, despite all the backstage stuff you mentioned, is vital in developing that confidence, right?
sure. Oh, sure.
How
Absolutely
often are
true.
they reading out their maths test answers to get that public speaking? So
Well,
this
right.
is the problem. If
Yeah.
if we diminish these, arts and
Hmm.
humanities, we're going to end up with people that are even more insular
Yeah.
than they already are, right?
Yeah. Oh, and all most of these people that are taking arts classes, and most of these people that are taking any classes, are eventually going to be in jobs where they're going to have to work with somebody else. They're going to
Hmm.
have to listen to somebody else. They're going to have to empathize with somebody else. They're going to have to work to deadlines. All of those things are present. All of those things are
Hmm.
present in the arts, and I, not that we're just trying to make better workers, because we should be trying to make better people
Hmm.
first and foremost. But there are definite benefits to the workforce that we're getting in those classes that are used all the time. It's project based learning with a
Hmm.
group.
Hmm. Yeah,
You're
those
gonna
social skills.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Which post COVID are have were during COVID were diminished of far too much, and so
Exactly.
that's something we can use it to build back from. So yeah,
Definitely. I love that. Let's pick up on COVID then.
sure.
So since COVID, work-life balance seems to be a larger, looming, more important topic than ever,
Hmm.
especially in education. What's your view
Hmm.
on that?
I think what we have post COVID is that Gen Z and Gen Alpha are making demands of those of us that are older, that I think they're demanding things that we should have taken care of before. I think the demand for better work life balance is the right demand. That I think that so many of us in education suffer the martyr syndrome. We put way too much on ourselves. We put we put time into the jobs that we could be putting toward our families and
Mhm.
our regular lives, and we forget that it's a means to an end. It's while I speak about this as an arts person. Obviously, I think the work we do as arts educators is vital. Absolutely, it makes us better humans, better workers, but that doesn't mean that we, the educators, have to be spending 18 hours a day on it and missing time with our own families over it. You can't pour from an empty cup. Also, I think when a teacher is taking care of themselves and their students see that, their students learn more of the value of that.
Yeah.
I think especially in the arts, our kids learn more from from their teachers' actions than their teachers' words, and that's especially true for kids that spend that are in the advanced classes, that spend more time with their teachers than in other cases. I think it's true in PE
Mhm.
as well. There's so much more learned from the action of the adult than there is from their words, and so yeah. I mean, I can remember myself. Even I did this at Shenfield. I mean, I remember directing a show there, and what I was told was, oh yeah, you'll rehearse the show at lunch, maybe the occasional after school rehearsal. And I'm going, no, we're going to rehearse this a lot after school. We have a lot we have to get done and everything. And then, I the thing is, I mean, I don't know why we had to do it that way. Why
Mhm.
couldn't we just take longer and do as much of it during the day as possible, and then everyone gets their evening free? In
Mhm.
Texas, and we've had this for a while on the books. We've got a theater production class in our high schools. That class's job. It's an advanced class, and their job is to create performances. And
Wow.
still, what we have is I know many a teacher doing this, and especially right now with UIL When I Play coming up, there's going to be many a teacher that is going to use their production class to prepare for UIL one act play, but then they're also going to have after school rehearsals too. There is a state law in Texas. You can only do that for 8 hours Monday through Thursday. You can't go beyond that during that window. But they load the weekend and they load the Fridays there, and
Wow.
I wish that my hope is that with Gen Z and Gen Alpha coming into the workforce and hopefully getting into management positions, that what will happen is we'll have a reset, and we'll say no, work is work, home is home. I really hope we're getting to that, and that's something that kind of flies in the face of the work mentality in the U.S. In the U.S. we largely have a working population that lives to work, rather than works to live. I think it's something, I may be wrong on this, and this may, I hope this doesn't offend any of your listeners. I think it's something we got from the Brits. There's a lot of our cultural habits that I noticed when I lived in the UK that I went, oh, that's where we got that. Oh, that's why we do that. Oh, we are similar, aren't we? And so,
but we had good cups of tea to drink whilst having these unmanageable workloads.
yes, for sure. But I'm hoping we're coming into a place, and not just in education, but in all work, where it's a work to live. You know, I don't want to miss time with my daughter. I actually, for my own self, as far as work-life balance, I support 90 theater teachers in the 8th largest school district in the country.
Wow.
I was, when I first got this job, I was trying to go to as many of their shows at their schools as I possibly could. And I realized pretty quick, like, okay, I can't go to everything. And I remember my boss, my first year on the job, going, you can't go to every event. Stop trying to go to every event. You can't do that. And now that I have a child, I'm, I don't go to nearly as many as I used to. But I also would say, I don't think that means that our theater teachers in Houston feel less supported because of that decision. They can still reach me. We can still have conversations. I still talk them through things. I'm still one of the first people to tell them, hey, this weekend you go take care of you, and everything. But and if they ever ask me, hey, how come I don't see you at shows as often? I'll go, because I have an almost 2-year-old, and those moments between birth and 4, I want to maximize those.
So, I love that.
Yeah.
That's so valuable. I think that's just getting back to what it means to be human, right? Because you're so right. Work should be secondary, and often it fills all our time. So I love that. And all we can do is the best we can do. And you've helped explain to your students why you can't come to every performance. That's good role modeling, right? And I think you're right. What we hope with the new generation is we'll have, I think, a joint thing that will help. Obviously, the introduction or the continued introduction of artificial intelligence into our roles to help take some of those tasks away. But then also, if we have educators and administrators and people role modeling how to cut off, how to set healthy boundaries, that's what then hopefully the next generation will grow up seeing, right? We need to practice what we preach.
Yep. Oh, for sure. For sure. Absolutely.
I love that. Oh my gosh, Jared, we've got 10 minutes left. Right. I'm going to jump to the next question. I've got actually 2 questions left. 2 questions. So you've touched on kind of your current role and what you do. It sounds like a really busy, interesting role. I'm interested though, what if you could go back into a full-time teaching position now? If you ever would imagine it, I don't know.
Sure.
Or what might you do differently?
Yeah, it is something that I think about. I think what I would do is my classroom. I'm going to assume that since we're talking hypotheticals, I'm going to assume I'd have an unlimited budget too, because why not? Long as we're imagining.
Okay.
So mine would be my classroom would be a culture of there'd be as much student autonomy as we could possibly have um, within them understanding the aim of what we're doing. A phrase that came to me, and I don't remember where I saw this, if I saw it on a TV show or a poster, or if I saw it in a dream. I remember that, and I wrote it down, and I had it in my cubicle at work. And it said there are two kinds of people in the world: those that want to control something, and those that want to create something. And I thought, okay, I like that. Give up control. And I'm a recovering control freak. When I was in the classroom, I was still in my control freak era, and so I would, as much as I could, would give over autonomy to the students as many times as I could, as many opportunities for them to run things as I can, or as possible. Shout out to my mentor teacher, Liz Ladd, now Liz Babb at Shenfield. Hi, Liz, who the best piece of advice she gave me after observing me once was, she goes, make them less dependent on you. And I hear that in my head all the time. I hear Liz often in my head all the time. So what else? It would be a culture of grace. There'd be a lot of remembering that we are human, and if there is error, there is error. It is what it is. And so a culture of grace would be, an understanding would be very important. If it's a theater class, if it's any class I'm teaching, there would also be a culture of something that's very big in theater right now, that is another thing that we should have been doing for years, is in theater world, there's a very big emphasis on consent and boundaries. When it comes to any kind of physical contact, or any kind of issue with space, getting close to somebody or further away with somebody, there's a big emphasis on that right now in the theater world. It largely came out of the Chicago professional theater scene, and the Chicago standards are sort of the standards that everybody seems to be adopting. So mine would be a culture of consent as well. Before, if there was ever a scene somebody was working on in class, and if somebody even had to do a high five or a fist bump or a hug, there would be discussion about that first, and there would be, okay, I'm all right with a hug for this long, I'm not okay with it. There would be discussion about boundaries for the sake of empowerment, because that's another thing I'd want a culture of empowerment in the room. Patience as well. That's something, as a recovering control freak, that I struggled with when I was in the classroom, and I would dedicate myself to being the most patient teacher. I do workshops with kids at conferences occasionally still too. And in those, I've kept an old practice of mine, which is never yell. I adopted that. If any of my students from Shenfield are listening, I know you may be laughing right now, because it was a practice that I really became conscious of in Texas later on, but it's something I've kept. So never yelling unless there's an absolute safety emergency reason. So yeah, I think a lot of those things are what I would bring with me. And copious use of technology. I'm actually a big believer in technology. We've bought, our district has purchased Digital Theatre Plus, which is a UK outfit that we now have in all of our high schools and middle schools that have theater, where they can watch world-class recorded productions and interviews with theater practitioners and those things. And I'd have a lot of use of technology through that.
Amazing.
Too. So yeah.
Amazing. Wow, I love that. That's a really good list to take forward. Jared, I've got one more question for you, but first we're going to actually jump. We've got a live listener who has typed a question for you. I don't know if you can see the chat.
I think I can, yeah.
But if you don't, I can read it out to you anyway. We've got a question from Shola. Morning, Shola, who's listening. Shola asks, and it's there in the chat, the students with special needs, how can you see when they've been put in a classroom that did not bring the best out of them, and just go with the program that the college or school have in place? What do you think needs to change? And so maybe, do you see students with special educational needs coming into theatre programs? What's your kind of response to Shola's question?
Yeah. I think it's something that in the district that I support, there are some schools that are doing it really well, and there are some schools that could do a much better job. I'm going to give a shout out to Westside High School in Houston ISD. They've had a class that is special needs students and a group of theater students that have been trained to work, and it's one-to-one general ed student and special needs student, and they're paired up together for the year, and it works wonderfully. There's so much that it brings out of everyone. There's a school district in Texas, Keller ISD, up by Fort Worth, that has a district-wide program, where for first level theater and first level visual art, they have one-to-one pairings of special needs students with general ed students. I actually think more of us in Texas ought to look at that model. And I think around the world we ought to look at that model.
It's a really interesting model, actually. Not something that I've seen.
Yeah. I've also seen cases where, and this is where it goes wrong. I've seen cases where a theater teacher is given a group of maybe 6 or 8 special needs students put in with one of their theater classes, and nobody took time to talk to anyone about it first, where they sort of just expected it to go fine. I think that's the wrong approach. I think there is some groundwork you need to do ahead of time. I think you need to train your general ed kids. I think you need to ready your special needs kids. I think it's just, this is the class you've signed up for. This is what you're doing in there. Your job is X, and yeah. So I guess, Shola, I don't know if I'm answering your question well, but I think there are right ways to do it. I think we've made a lot of mistakes with it that I hope we've learned from. I think it's an area that we're a lot more aware of that needs to be better. And I know that in the U.S., district by district, it's something that's being looked at. I know that when a good friend of mine in Plano ISD went over to Keller and looked at their model, the people from Plano went, okay, we're doing exactly what Keller's doing, and we're going to adopt it. I have wanted, that's actually something I hope for and envision in my own job. That is a program I would love to implement. In the current district I'm in, there's reasons why that's something that may take a little longer to get done. I'm not saying we can't do it, but it's something that may take a little longer. But it's something that I've always that I am passionate about as well, and I think we all should be doing it. Wonderful. I hope that answered the question.
Well, actually, Shola has come back in the chat and said that's a good response. So thank you, Jared, and thank you, Shola, for asking such a thoughtful question as well. That's really kind. So also, morning, the guests have just joined us. Morning, West, who's also over in USA. I can see he's an early bird as well, just joining us. And just in time for our last question. So, Jared, sadly, this is coming to the end of our show. The last thing I want to ask you is, what is something that existed in your teaching experience in England that you wish you could have in your current work? But before you answer, listeners, I know Jared has already told us he loves English tea, so green tick. Oh, yeah. He has a motto of don't yell, and also that he loved the phrase create more, control less. But is there something else that has really stuck with you, Jared, from your time teaching in the UK that you still wish you could have, or that you hold dear to you?
Sure. A couple of things I really enjoyed, particularly at Shenfield. There was a wonderful studio space that they had that was a working theater space, but it was such a wonderful classroom. I'd want to replicate a studio space like that again, if I could have one of those again. And then another thing we had at Shenfield, we had numerous people teaching together, all teaching theater at the same time, and we would meet in our drama department meetings in a learning community and talk about, how we're going to teach this lesson and that. And not every theater teacher in the U.S. has that. What we often have in the U.S. is we have one or two, maybe three, maybe four theater teachers at the most. I did hear of a school somewhere in the U.S. that has 12. And actually, I think they're in Texas. But often it's not that many. And I loved that it was so many of us at Shenfield, and we could offer different ideas to each other. Sometimes we would swap classes, and that was great. But I love that community sense of creating the work together, and I'd want more of that.
Yeah, the space, the people in the space, and the community that brings. I love that so much.
Sure.
Sounds like you have some really good memories of teaching over here in the UK.
For sure.
Wonderful. Right, just before we end the show, I just want to thank all our listeners who've listened live. We've got Wes, Dave, David, Sam, Cruz just joined us, unfortunately just at the end of our show, but for everyone else, you can listen back. Jared, we just want to all, on behalf of me and the listeners, thank you for your time and also wish you the best of luck with the festival tomorrow.
Thank you so much. I want to shout out to my wife and my daughter. I love you both so much, Valerie and Alice. If you do end up listening to this long show, I love you both so much.
That's beautiful. Hi, Valerie and Alice. You should be very proud.
my journey led me to them. Everything led me to them. So grateful for that.
It's beautiful. As you say, our journeys are what they need to be. We just have to trust in the journey sometimes, even though it can, feel like we're not going the right way. Just have to trust. So that's so wonderful. I feel so wholesome after talking to you. Thank you so much. And Jared, next time I watch my favorite cartoon, King of the Hill, I will remember you and this amazing conversation.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
I wish you all the best for tomorrow and the weekend, and look after yourself, Jared.
You too, Poppy. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye. And to everyone else, thank you for listening in. You can listen back as well as all our other shows on our Teachers Talk Radio website from all our other hosts. If you were at the BET exhibition this week, you might have come and seen Tom and me and Marie and all our other hosts there. Thanks for just supporting our amazing radio station that shares people's voices. Wishing you all the best for the weekend, and I'll be back with you with a very special guest very, very soon. Take care.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.